Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, May 22nd, 2026, and we're heading into a 3-day weekend with Memorial Day on Monday. Hopefully you'll get a little bit of downtime. I know not everybody gets a 3-day weekend, but hopefully you'll have some time to relax and recharge and reflect on the service of our military members who've given the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to introduce you just briefly, give you a tease for I'm going to be writing an article next week on this couple, a local couple here in Washington, owners of a well-known business called Teeters. Those are the inversion therapy exercise equipment. That's just the beginning of their brand. They've branched off into many other things, but they are lifelong Democrats. But speaking out about Washington's increasing tax burden and sort of anti-business friendly environment, and the pending income tax may be the final straw for them. Again, we're going to hear a little bit of that conversation today. I met them virtually in an interview this morning, so I'm going to share that with you. Just a teaser for what's coming more next week. And we're learning more about what went down yesterday in Longview, a story that is now getting lots of national attention today. The superintendent in the Longview School District was arrested on Thursday, made her first court appearance today, accused of obstructing an investigation, among other allegations. And this has to do with sexual assault involving the boys basketball team. Apparently some of the older players and the alleged victims being the younger players. That case is set to go to trial in July, but on the other side of that, you have the superintendent of the district and at least one other staff member accused of obstructing this and kind of trying to keep it, let's deal with this all in the family. Let's not go public about this. Of course, they are mandatory reporters, so that's not okay. So the latest on that case coming up, and we have Senator John Braun weighing in on that. And then finally, a big win for a couple from Tacoma, foster parents in a case against DCYF that has been going back and forth in the courts for more than 2 years. This is forcing now the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to rewrite the Washington Administrative Code, basically, that has been forcing for several years now foster parents in our state to adopt some of the more radical gender ideology policies for children in their care. They're going to have to make some big changes as a result of this settlement. So let's dive into today's episode. This morning, I met virtually, just via video conference, Chris and Riley Lear. They own a family business called Teeter. You may be familiar with them. Their products are all over the world, really. The inversion therapy where you kind of strap yourself to a board and maybe you've got back problems, spinal adjustment issues or joint issues, and you kind of get on that exercise platform that kind of puts you upside down for a while. They've got lots of other products, but this is a family-owned operation and they're local. They live on Lake Tapps. Their business has been operated out of Bonnie Lake for many years, and they're lifelong Democrats. He's from Canada. And interesting, though, they've felt it necessary now to speak out against the policies of the party they have supported that have been pushing an anti-business climate in the state of Washington. And it may well put them out of business or force them to relocate their business or relocate their domicile or both. They don't want to, but they may be forced because of the pending income tax on top of all the other burdensome taxes and regulations on business here in the state of Washington. So here's part of my conversation today with Chris and Riley Lear.
What happens in an S corporation is very different than what happens on an individual basis, right? So how we deal as an S corporation is everything flows through to us as individuals. And our cash position is not necessarily in alignment with our
tax return.
Right, because our tax return shows a profit that actually isn't realized, right? That money is tied up in inventory and actually in the business. So it may show that we made $2 million, but we have $3.5 million of inventory sitting in our warehouse. So the cash availability is not there.
There is a prism to the way this country functions. Lots of facets of what makes it work. And just assigning something to 20,000 Washingtonians, and that's all. Don't worry. And I read the state website last night in preparation for this, and I actually read it, thought, I'm on board with this. Let's do this. Let's go get this money. But I'm on the other side, and I understand the implications.
What it actually means.
You have to kind of
rhetoric to a certain extent.
Yeah, you have to
It's
kind
not
of
reality.
Yes, you have to go through it to really understand it before you can empathize with all these different facets and understand the net result, which is lack of motivation for people who are driven to excel. Because if you want me to employ people, you want us to be successful, you want me to take a big risk, to take a $10 million loan out to build a building, you got to give me some stability that allows me to feel comfortable and sleep at night, knowing I won't lose everything.
Right.
Or
there has to be the understanding that the profit in a business is not representative of cash availability.
So much more of my conversation with this couple. I just wanted to offer you a tease now, but I'll be putting the article up on our Center Square Washington page on Tuesday. The Monday's the holiday, so it'll be out on Tuesday, and I'll share more in the podcast that day as well. Again, they're not sure if they're going to relocate their business and or their personal residence. They don't want to. They love the Pacific Northwest and their whole family's here. But this may be, as you've heard from many other business owners and wealthy individuals in the state, the pending income tax is sending people out the gates of the state. So more on that next week. Now, the Longview School District is making, unfortunately, national headlines, not for a good reason, as police in Longview on Thursday arrested the superintendent of the school district as part of the ongoing investigation related to the reported sexual assault case involving students at Mark Morris High School. Now, as we reported on yesterday, a Facebook post from the Longview Police Department charges Superintendent Karen Cloninger of tampering with a witness, failing to report, and obstructing a law enforcement officer, all very serious charges. Now, detectives investigating this since back in February learned that staff at the school and then district leadership, again, these are allegations, are accused of knowing about these allegations of physical and sexual misconduct involving students, but maybe then trying to sort of deal with it internally. Anyone who works in a school district knows, anyone who works in healthcare and others are deemed to be mandatory reporters. So you find out about something like this, you must report it to police immediately. Well, the allegation in this case is that they did not do that. So she's facing very serious allegations, as is another district staff member. So I reached out today to Senator John Braun, Republican of Centralia. He is running for that 3rd congressional district that encompasses Longview, this school district that's under some scrutiny. I reached out to him to ask him, what have you heard about the investigation, the seriousness of these allegations against the superintendent and the student services director? I wanted to get his feedback on this because he's also been one of the most vocal critics of some of these policies that some school districts have adopted to kind of keep secrets from parents in cases like this. So here's part of my conversation this morning with Senator John Braun.
This is very troubling, and you know, some of this stuff has been percolating in the community for a while. So I knew about that, and I mean the justice system will work its way through this. So I don't want to get ahead of that, but very disturbing, and I think it reflects this messaging you've heard from every Democrat in our state, from the governor to the superintendent of public education to Democratic legislators that have kind of insisted that these kids are theirs, that they're going to deal with it, and not respect the fact that parents are the ones that are responsible, and parents need to be informed of these types of things. There needs to be transparency and candor, and I get that they have to. If there's an investigation, there's rules. But the very first rule, not just a rule, but a law, is if there is, sexual harassment or sexual assault involved, they are mandatory reporters. And the notion that they know best, the arrogance that they know best, is deeply troubling.
I also reached out to U.S. Representative Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, Democrat from that 3rd district, whom Senator Braun is challenging. It's an election year, of course. We wanted to give her every opportunity to respond. Now, I was told she was unavailable for an interview, but she also voted this week in a related case that a House of Representatives passed legislation at the federal level this week to basically withhold funding from states like Washington that are keeping secrets from parents, that are embracing these gender ideologies. My student wants to be called a different name, but I don't have to tell you, mom and dad, what's happening at school. So again, we now have legislation that's been passed that says districts, you can't do that anymore. And yet here in the state of Washington, we continue to do that. Now, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, again, a Democrat, she was one of only 9 Democrats who actually voted in support of that legislation this week. So I found that to be interesting. I reached out to ask her about her vote, which kind of broke against the party. It was all Republicans, excepting a few who were not present for the vote, and 9 Democrats who voted in support of this legislation. So here's what she sent me via email after saying that she could not grant me an interview today. I'll just read you part of this, but she says, as a parent of a young child, I'm asked to sign off on small things in my kids' school day, down to whether they get sunscreen at recess. A child's name and sense of self are not small things. They are fundamental. And on something that important, I don't believe parents should be cut out of the loop. This bill requires schools to get a parent's consent before changing an elementary or middle school student's pronouns or name on school form. She went on to say, my heart breaks for children who don't feel safe letting their parents into their world. So again, wasn't able to get an interview with her on this important issue, but it's all kind of related because according to what Senator Braun told me, he believes that the policies that kind of separate where schools feel like they can keep parents out of the loop on things like this are what may have contributed, this is Senator Braun, what may have contributed to the Longview superintendent and other staff members thinking, we don't have to really report this and let everybody know what's going on. We're just going to deal with this internally. He believes that those policies may have contributed to that mindset, which now again have very serious charges being leveled against the district. Now, finally, Washington's Department of Children, Youth, and Families has agreed to a permanent injunction that will bar state officials from forcing foster parents in the state to embrace gender ideology. Kind of sensing a theme here on the day for children in their care. A federal district judge ruled last month, and we reported on this, that requiring them to kind of socially transition children in their care is a violation of the First Amendment. Say you've got a Christian couple, like in this case, it was Shane and Jennifer DeGrosse of Tacoma, who'd been longtime foster parents, about 9 years before then the state of Washington started forcing foster families to embrace this gender ideology. And they said, wait a minute, and this goes against our, religious freedom. We would not want to embrace that. If we get a foster child in our care who is maybe questioning gender or whatever, we're not going to embrace that and say, yeah, you're probably in the wrong body, and let's get you to some doctors and let's move ahead with this transition while you're in our care. They refused to embrace it, and they ended up joining along with Alliance Defending Freedom as their legal counsel in pushing back on this policy. And again, they've won. And now, in fact, they have forced the Department of Children, Youth, and Families to rewrite the Washington Administrative Code that has been for several years now, forcing foster parents to embrace this gender ideology. Otherwise, you can't be a foster parent in the state, or you can only take kids that are, babies, toddlers. But boy, once they're 5 and they might start questioning their gender identity, you can't have those kids in your care. I spoke briefly today with ADF's senior counsel who represented this family. He told me that, they were merely asking to be treated the same as any other family without having to compromise their core beliefs. And so this is a huge victory for ADF and this family. And then I spoke to Representative Travis Couture, Republican from Allen. He's been sharply critical of DCYF, not only over, the foster care system, but other issues with DCYF, including the Keeping Families Together Act, which, critics blame, including Representative Couture, for the sharp increase in child deaths and critical incidents where children are left to languish in the care of their drug addicted parents instead of removing them and requiring their parents to, get clean and sober before they get their kids back. So I spoke with him today specifically about this win for this foster family and DCYF having to amend their policy. And this is part of the conversation I had today with Representative Couture.
The state of Washington is staring down the barrel of over $2 billion in tort liability. And what that means is lawsuits against the state of Washington that the state of Washington lost. And when you look deeper into those lawsuits, the majority of them revolve around the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. They're losing tons of lawsuits because they simply don't fix the problems. They simply violate people's rights, and they're not doing the right things. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. And in this case, where they're asking foster families, actually not even asking them, they're by the force of government, like a gun to your head, telling you that you will affirm the pronouns or you can't be a foster parent. Absolutely insane and unconstitutional. I'm glad they lost it. That's an important thing that we should be happy that happened, but sad that it ever occurred. We have a radical, ideological state agency who is less interested in making foster care better and making foster parents whole and trying to help them out, and more interested into trying to force feed their radical gender ideology.
Now, DCYF did send me a statement midday today. I want to put that up about this settlement in particular. Part of what they sent me said the settlement agreement respects the religious beliefs of foster parents while ensuring LGBTQIA+ youth are placed in an environment that is safe and supports their well-being. That attributed to DCYF Secretary Tana Sen. And one of the key points of the settlement does require them to update their foster care licensing rules. Foster parents will not be required to use words that conflict with their sincerely held religious beliefs as a condition of being licensed. Again, that's from DCYF in relationship to this settlement agreement. Also important to note here that DCYF has to pay $250,000 in legal fees to Alliance Defending Freedom in this case. So yet another big payout of taxpayer money for an agency that has been sued and lost repeatedly in recent years. And yet tort reform efforts were rebuffed again this year during the 2026 legislative session. So another $250,000 payout, taxpayer funded payout for DCYF for their policies, which are repeatedly getting slapped down in the courts. So that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I hope you're able to have a little bit of downtime, maybe get to enjoy a 3-day weekend, some time with family. And thank you again for all those families who've sacrificed. I know many folks that watch our podcast serve and protect in our armed forces, and certainly have had family members who have served and protected and potentially lost their lives over the years. So thank you. Thank you for that sacrifice and for what you do every day to protect our freedoms. I hope you'll have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Check out the Center Square Washington page, and we'll see you next week.